Hello and welcome to Mirror Fighting's first Fight Week preview ahead of Conor McGregor's trilogy bout with Dustin Poirier on Saturday night. My name's Martin Domin. I'm joined by my colleague Donagh Corby. First of three shows before the fight on Saturday night, we're going to take a look back at the rematch in January, which of course Poirier won by second round stoppage, and take a look at what we can expect, or what we think we can expect from the two men in the days to come. Donagh, as I said, let's start with January. Conor McGregor stopped in the second round by Dustin Poirier. And so much of the talk afterwards really was not about Dustin Poirier, but about Conor McGregor, about his approach to the fight, about that stance, about Manny Pacquiao, about boxing. Mm-hmm. How much is that fair? And how much of it takes away from what was a good victory for Dustin Poirier?
I think both assessments are correct. I think that Poirier performed particularly well. I also think that if Conor McGregor were 100% focused, he tends to get past fighters with the skill set of Dustin Poirier, generally, from what we've seen. Look, it was a bizarre move to bring in the Crumlin boxing people for his MMA camps. From what I heard, they had particularly limited knowledge of mixed martial arts. So it was an interesting thing to try, and it worked. People forget that Sutcliffe was in the corner for the Cerrone fight, I believe, or at least he was involved in the camp. So it clearly worked in some way, shape, or form. But, for a true top-level, world-level fighter like Poirier, you would need to be at completely 100%. And I think McGregor is fair in his assessment when he says maybe he was at 70% or 80%, and you can't fight world-level competitors like that when you're only focused that much.
You're right, of course, and there was a lot of talk about Manny Pacquiao, but even talking about Manny Pacquiao was just, even contemplating that fight just seemed to me to suggest something about McGregor's mindset, because it's not the same as Floyd Mayweather. He's not really a fight that you could go into and think, I can survive 10 rounds. No. Pacquiao would probably do a job on McGregor. So I think the question is it simply that he focused too much on boxing, wanted Pacquiao, thought he could swat aside Poirier, if you like, or does it just lend to a greater problem with his mindset in that he's done it all, really, made millions, we all know it, and actually maybe he's not as focused as he likes to tell us?
Yeah, look, it's incredibly difficult when you're like, you have to think about it. Like, he's made more money outside of the cage than like any other athlete in the world. He's the richest athlete in the world. It's very difficult to maintain your focus like that, particularly when it's a sport where you're getting very badly hurt, not only every time you compete, but every time you train, every time you spar, you're getting punched in the head, you're getting kicked. This is a particularly grueling sport to compete in, and I think it's difficult to maintain that focus when you are as I suppose as rich as he is. And I suppose Pacquiao would have offered a different challenge. Pacquiao would have been seen as someone who, like you say, could really hurt him if he didn't prepare properly, and that's why he was giving Pacquiao a lot more attention than he probably gave Mayweather. Like, he didn't have boxing people come in at all for Mayweather. Even when the fight was announced, when it was confirmed, he still maintained, Owen Roddy, John Kavanagh, that whole camp. Artem Lobov was involved. It was strange. That was equally as strange as bringing in the Crumlin boxing people for MMA, to not bring them in when he was doing a boxing match against Mayweather. But, he obviously understood that he would need a certain amount of time that wasn't going to be granted. He would need 6 months, 8 months, and that wasn't really going to be available to him. So he decided he was going to try to do both. I do think that if he opts to focus on one or other of the sports, ideally mixed martial arts, he should probably be okay. Particularly in MMA, I would imagine there's a lot of world level people that he can beat. I think Oliveira is beatable. I think Poirier is beatable. I think there's a lot of people that McGregor can still beat at the absolute top level of MMA. But yeah, you're right about boxing. I don't think there's very many top boxers he can beat.
We saw a picture this week of I guess, the end of the camp, and he put up a photograph of everybody who was on the team, and you mentioned Phil Sutcliffe, who was not there. So it does, and he has said it's now focused on MMA. It's a pure MMA camp. So it seemed like he's saying all the right things. But how much, what we're talking now, 2016 was Alvarez, so almost 5 years since that fight. How much has what Conor McGregor says and maybe shows lost a bit of its appeal, if you like? Because it used to be that you could really take whatever he said as gospel and it would probably happen, whether it was a prediction or whatever. But I get the feeling now maybe that's not so much the case.
Yeah, the whole thing has changed so much. I mean, like even this third Poirier fight, I don't necessarily understand the appeal that leads people to believe it's going to be some sort of a record-breaking event. I don't know that there are 3 million people who really want to watch Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier again when there weren't 3 million people that wanted to pay for uh, Conor versus Khabib when he was at his absolute peak. He was coming off of the Mayweather fight. Everyone had thought like he had won the hearts and minds in that Mayweather fight because he had gone the 10 rounds. So people were very impressed with him, and he'd never been more famous. That had done record-breaking pay-per-view numbers, the second biggest pay-per-view numbers in boxing history, and so much bigger than anything the UFC had done. So it's weird to me that people think this is going to be bigger than that. But I think like you're right. It's difficult to take everything he says as seriously now because, like you say, when he fought Alvarez, every fight he was predicting correctly, bar obviously the Diaz one, and I don't know if he's going to look, maybe he comes out and he really puts on a performance on Saturday night and he shows us like, oh yeah, he's ready to go back to the top championship world level. And that'll be interesting if it does happen. But yeah, I think you're right in saying that his appeal has died off just a small bit. And then of course, people's popularity just fades over time. Particularly if they're not as active. Like he was there when he fought Alvarez. That was his fourth fight in 12 months. When he had fought Aldo, Diaz twice, and Alvarez, all of which were record-breaking pay-per-views at the time, and he hasn't even fought four times since then. So, or he's just fought four times since then. So, it's I think the appeal has worn off a small bit. But then again, it comes to Saturday night, and it's very rare to find people who aren't interested in that McGregor fight when it actually arrives.
For sure. I mean, one thing that's definitely been clear, he's very much taken himself out of the media spotlight. I know
Yeah.
as journalists, we probably expect too much. We almost have a right to know exactly what's going
Yeah.
on. But then again, with the rise of social media, then we all feel that we have an insight into people's lives. But he has been very quiet. We've had 3 episodes now of Embedded, and he hasn't been in one single one. He's only just arrived in Las Vegas. He's done a short interview with his own website. And of course, he will do more now. But you can certainly say, and even we were supposed to speak to John Kavanagh the other week, but he cancelled. Everyone's been very quiet. And so whether that means anything or not, I don't know. But at least it does suggest that he's removed himself from any distractions. His family are no longer training out there with him in camp.
Yeah, look, the last time he was this quiet was probably Diaz too, and we all saw the adjustments he made there. That was a fight where he seemed to be putting a lot of the odds against himself. Like they would have allowed him to do that fight at lightweight, and he chose not to do it. He chose to do it at welterweight, but he knew that was going to be a particularly difficult thing to do, and so he took himself out of it. I remember that was supposed to be at UFC 200, which ended up being about a month and a half earlier or so than the eventual fight was. And that got cancelled because he had some other things happening, and he refused to go to the launch press conference. So yeah, I honestly, I'm almost surprised he's going to show up at this presser tonight, and we will see. We'll see tonight if he actually does. I know that he's, as usual, I'd imagine he'll be late, but he tends to appear when he's told he has to. So yeah, I think when McGregor goes quiet, it tends to be bad news for whoever he's fighting.
You mentioned the press conference is, well, I mean, the good thing is, for an entertainment point of view, fans will be there. It's 5 o'clock in Vegas, which means 1 a.m. Friday morning, I guess, for us.
Lucky you.
And McGregor, exactly. And it will be interesting because the last time was as it was with Cowboy, which we kind of expected. But the second fight with Poirier was very nice in the build-up. Mm-hmm. Disappointingly, I would suggest for many people, but it seems this time will be different. He's as I said, take everything with a pinch of salt. But even what he has said so far, he'll be going out on a stretcher. He's going to kill him, etc., etc. But it does seem like he will be a bit more fired up. But the question is whether Poirier is at all bothered by that.
Well, I was just watching Poirier's interview with TSN, and he seems to still be in that January mindset. He doesn't even seem all that annoyed by the fact that McGregor donated the money to a different charity. He seems to think that, look, it's children in the same vicinity. It's likely the same children that would have been helped by the good fight anyway. So he doesn't seem overly concerned by that. He seems like he's been pretty complimentary of McGregor. He said, he believes that he's a well-rounded martial artist, and I think we're going to see, McGregor trying to draw Poirier out a bit. And look, he's been able to do it in the past because Poirier really reacted terribly the first time they fought. People forget that it was a mental deterioration from Poirier going into that fight, and McGregor is able to draw that out of people. So we'll see, and particularly with a packed out, I think the presser's at is it at the NGM Grand or is it at the T-Mobile Arena? I'm not sure.
Good question. You've got me there. I imagine probably the Grand.
A packed out arena of Conor fans who've been deprived not only of watching Conor all year, but of watching any sort of live events like this for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. So I think, we're going to see how Poirier's mindset really is when they're face to face again tonight, which is exciting.
Definitely. I guess one thing Poirier does have now that he didn't have in January he doesn't have now that he did have, it's just that baggage of 2014. And no matter what he said, in the back of your mind, having been knocked out by somebody, you must go into a second fight thinking a little bit. Now he does seem very, very calm, and it will be interesting to see if McGregor's taunts just fall on deaf ears. But hopefully, regardless, even if they do, hopefully they'll provide some entertainment for us,
for sure.
At least. Before any of that happens, what are your thoughts at the moment about how the fight goes? Have they changed over the last 6 months?
Over the last 6 months, it's hard to tell. I think that people are right when they say that McGregor did win the first round in that first fight, but it was super close. And I thought that the Chael Sonnen was right in his assessment when he said that the ease with which Poirier was able to take McGregor down should be something of concern for particularly, I'd imagine, John Kavanagh, his head coach, going into this one. It wasn't a particularly great shot. It wasn't particularly well set up, and he was able to get Conor down. And we all know that Conor is not the greatest fighter off his back. He's not the worst either. I think people underestimate his ability off his back, but he's not the best fighter out there. And Poirier comes from a very grappling heavy, wrestling heavy gym in ATT. So I think we're not going to see so many calf kicks in this one. I think that Poirier is right in saying that McGregor would be crazy to not have just been drilling that for the last 6 months. So I would imagine that we're going to see a fight where Poirier probably takes a few. I would imagine that because he's a bit more emboldened now, he knows that he has the capabilities to knock Conor out. He knows that he has the chin, particularly at lightweight. I know their first fight was a featherweight, and it's easier to be knocked out when you've had an extreme weight cut, like Poirier would have had to do to get to featherweight. So he understands that he has the chin to take big shots from McGregor, and I would imagine that you're going to see Poirier take a few more risks, and maybe that works for Conor. But we'll see on Saturday night.
We will indeed. We will be back in about 24 hours to look back on the press conference to hopefully analyse an entertaining night. And then again we'll have the weigh-in on Friday, and then we'll be back on Saturday to look back at that and to preview the fight properly. Donagh, thank you for your time. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.